Well, hello and welcome back to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. This is our bi-weekly video podcast that we do, and we've been doing for so long, I don't remember when we started at this point. But we're excited to have you here today. We've got a great show in store for you today, and always happy to have some really amazing guests that join us, and today is no exception. We've got Dr. Kara Dymond joining us today to talk about ableism, exclusionary practices in school. Going to be an interesting conversation for sure. If this happens to be your first time here, welcome, and really excited to have you join us. A little bit about who we are and what we do. The Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint was formed in 2019. Really started out of a personal journey and experience with my son. Ultimately, formed this organization. Looking at things like restraint and seclusion, but it was really broader than that. It was restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment, all the things often done to kids in the name of behavior. And a lot of it even went upstream, the behavior approaches that are in schools and things like that as well. A lot of things that were not only not working, but we're sometimes doing harm. So we are a small nonprofit trying to influence change in the way that, schools adopt policies and practices. And we're trying to really encourage the reduction and elimination of practices like seclusion and restraint, as well as punitive and exclusionary discipline, and hopefully curb the school to prison pipeline as well. For those of you that are joining us maybe for the first time, welcome. If you are coming back again, we have a lot of people that join us on a regular basis, and today we are at a slightly different time. We're about an hour different today. Just needed a time that lined up a little better bit for our guests today. So we're a little bit later than usual. But if you're joining us, and let us know in the chat. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. I want to share a couple of things with you, and I'm going to begin by sharing with you that we have a sponsor this year that has been helping support the podcast, and that is the Bowman Consulting Group. Bowman Consulting is actually made up of two individuals that I've had the privilege of knowing for some time here. I'm actually going to go down to the bottom here and share who they are. And that is, we've got something happened there with the website. But we've got Doris Bowman and Rick Bowman, who make up the Bowman Consulting Group. And they are amazing former educators, trainers, do some incredible work. You may know their work from their recent book that they released called Your FBA is a Fantasy, which really kind of goes into adopting trauma-informed, neuroscience-aligned ways of creating functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans, something that is greatly needed because so many of our behavior plans are focused on the wrong things and not working. They actually just released a second book in pretty quick succession. And that book is called Facing the Fantasy, Finding the Way Forward. It really goes into understanding trauma and neuroscience and how to better support kids, in schools and homes and throughout our journeys. They also do a tremendous amount of training. They're doing a workshop coming up here in April called Facing the Fantasy, Finding a Way Forward. Recommend that you check out their website. We've got a special link here, and Courtney can throw that in the chat for you. But they actually created a special website for our podcast so that people can learn more about who they are and the work they do. I want to thank Bowman Consulting for being a sponsor for the podcast. I appreciate their support for the work that we're doing. Also, want to share with you a couple of other things. If you are not familiar with our website, absolutely check out our website. We've got a lot of incredible information there. We're posting articles all the time. In fact, I posted one just the other day that I think is a really important read. The article was called "If Not Seclusion and Restraint, Then What? A Better Way Forward for Students and Educators," really addressing a question we often get. We bring this topic up with schools and educators, and we get the question of, well, if not this, then what? Or you don't understand the kids that we work with. And we absolutely understand the challenges facing educators as well as the challenges facing our children. Encourage you to check that out. Check out our website and learn more. And of course, while you're there, if you're interested in supporting our work, there's an option to join the Alliance. And you can actually join as a monthly contributor, anywhere from $5 and up. And when you do that, it really helps support this work. We are a very small nonprofit. We don't have a big pot of funding that helps us to do this work. So it's important that we get, help and donations that enable us to continue to do the things we're doing. Two other very quick announcements, and then we're going to get Kara on and have a conversation. A couple of things that we've been working on recently. One is we've had the opportunity to get some data and look at some data. and started out in Pennsylvania. And any of you that know Courtney Litzinger, who is my partner in this work, Courtney lives in Pennsylvania. We've been really concerned about what's been going on there in terms of the use of restraint and the use of seclusion. Even though the state law makes it sound like seclusion should not be happening, we know it is. We've actually created a little data explorer, and this has taken the latest data available through the Department of Education and made it easier to find. So in the past, you had to go to a spreadsheet, you had to kind of drill over. We've taken the data and allowed you to then actually search by school or district. So you can click on a district and you can find out more about the district and their practices. Now, in this case, it only has restraint data because in theory, seclusion is not supposed to be happening, but it is, and that's a whole nother problem, one that we're hoping to take on with a Pennsylvania project we're beginning to launch. Also want to mention, we did a data explorer looking at Wisconsin data. And Wisconsin, of course, has data for restraint and seclusion. Again, you can look up your district or your school, but you can also look by usage. So we have an easy way to look at, we have an index which looks at per 100, students enrolled. We also look at the highest number of incidents as well. So these are tools out there. Hopefully we'll be able to provide more of them, in the future, but just wanted to share these things with you. And they may be helpful to you in the work and the advocacy that you're doing. So just thought that would be a fun thing to share today. So with that, let's get to why we are really here today. It's not to listen to me. You get to hear me talk all the time. I want to introduce you to our special guest here today, Dr. Kara Dymond. Tell you a little bit about Kara. Kara is a late diagnosed autistic ADHD advocate, teacher, researcher, and award-winning teacher educator from Toronto, Canada. Her work in supporting autistic students inspired her book, and I actually have a copy of this in my hands here, Creating a Neurodiversity-Affirming Classroom, which is a fantastic book. We've actually been doing a book study of it recently, which is ending next week, and I think you're going to be our special guest for the book study. And your research has been around accessibility in graduate teacher education, teaches graduate courses in accessible education and classroom neurodiversity at Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, University of Toronto, attempting to counteract the segregated and ableist ways in which education facilities teach about learner variability. And certainly a lot of work to be done there. And of course, you wrote this fantastic book, really helping to shift the lens and move people in a direction where they can create neurodiversity affirming classrooms and spaces, and that work to move away from ableism and to move away from exclusionary practices in schools. I know that is near and dear to your heart, and I know that that's something that we're going to be talking about today. So let me begin by welcoming you, and also your cat. I see a cat tail there.
You'll probably see more than one, but I just got home. They're very excited to see me. And
friendly, kid-friendly, family-friendly podcast. So if a pet joins us on screen, we love it. Dogs, cats, whoever it may be, birds, whoever. And sometimes kids will pop over shoulders, and we'll see other things that happen. At any rate, welcome, and thanks for being here today.
I'm so excited to be here to chat with you about some of the topics that get me riled up, and also topics that I love.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And what I love about doing this is that you and I've had a chance to chat before, and to me, having these conversations feels not much different whether we're doing the podcast or just having a conversation. And it's always, I think really helpful to, meet and collaborate and learn from and work with like-minded people in these spaces who are doing some really meaningful work. So it's a real honor to have you here today, and I look forward to our conversation.
Me too.
So again, if you happen to be watching live, and I know we've got a number of people that have already started watching here live, and one of the interesting things is, and I probably shared this with you before, but when we do these, we actually get people from all over the world that watch. Of course, I'm here in the US, you're in Canada, but we get people from New Zealand and Australia and UK and India, kind of all over the world. And it's really, to me, it's really fun to see where people are joining us from. But a lot of these topics are important. These are not uniquely Canadian or American issues. We certainly have our own issues right now, but these issues are not uniquely American or Canadian. These are things that are challenges for people all over the globe. And to get that perspective, I think, is really interesting as well. So I want to begin with a little bit of background. For those that may be learning about you and your work for the first time, I wonder if you might tell me a little bit about kind of who you are and your journey, and kind of, what led you down this road. What led you to education. So give
Yeah,
us just a little bit of your backstory, and then we're going to dive into kind of ableism and exclusionary practices.
sure. So I'm going to go way, way, way back
You go
to
back as far as you want.
elementary school.
There you go.
And my brother Danny is a few years younger than I am, and he is autistic and has an intellectual disability. And I remember my parents sitting me and my other siblings down and talking to us about this. And I really took Danny under my wing, and I have a very vivid memory that just like really instilled in me, um, I guess, what is still to this day sort of this driving force that I have. I was, I think, about 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and I was walking past his classroom, and I heard his teacher yelling at him, and I was able to see him, and he was staring at the floor, unresponsive, just like looking like he wished he was invisible. And I remember thinking, like, doesn't the teacher understand he can't respond to you, especially when you're yelling at him? And it just like filled my little heart with outrage at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And also it got me thinking about how so many people didn't see um, all that was inside him
Mm.
and all that he could do, and weren't creating the conditions that were conducive to get him to think and feel safe to share and be able to process.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
And
and
what grade were you in at this point?
I would have been about grade 4 or 5, I think.
Mm, mhm, mhm,
Um, and he was about grade 1 or 2.
mm.
And yeah, it just, I started to do homework with him, and I would add Mario and Luigi into math problems, and just, I knew that there is always a way. Like, I just truly believed there is a way to connect. There's a way to, help him to express himself and think. And, one of the things that I just learned intuitively and through my parents' wonderful modeling was like processing time. If you ask Danny a couple of questions in a row, he might just walk away. It's
Mm.
too much. Like, you need to wait. You need to
Right.
give time. And there is so much going on inside of him. Like, I'm very close with him, and he has this, since he was a teenager, he was developing like whole universes, whole world, like video game universes, different, sort of alien races with their own histories and mythologies and things no one would really know, because how he often presents in school,
Mm.
he really does struggle to process information quickly. He uh, does not answer easily to things. And it really got me thinking about how easily students can be written off,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
and judged for perceived lack of
mm,
capability.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
And
And
so
not seen for all the wonderful things that
for all that,
who they are.
yeah.
It's interesting, and I don't recall if I shared this with you or not when we talked before. It's been a while since we connected, but
Mhm.
your story that you share, um, I have a similar story, and it's about my daughter. And my daughter is actually a little bit younger than my son, but in elementary school, a few years, behind him. Um, she saw the challenges for him as an autistic, student in a
Mhm.
school that was not seeing him for all the amazing things that he had, and that was in a system that was not well designed or supporting him well.
Yes.
And she saw some of the struggles, I think, that we had as a family as well,
Mhm.
trying to get him the help. And I'll never forget, I mean, she was probably around second grade at the time when she said, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a special education teacher. I
Mhm.
want to help kids like my brother. And
Mhm.
I mean, it just was so, I mean, and again, this really echoes kind of your experience, but
Yeah.
it just was so impactful to me that not only did she want to help, but kind of saw it. And of course, it turns out that both of my children are neurodivergent. And my daughter today, she's 16 now, but has developed an interest in, neuroscience, psychology, is probably going to, go off to school either for psychology or social work, or maybe education, who knows.
Mhm.
But, it's really, I mean, your story connects with my heart because, I think about that experience that we had, and, you know, kids even very young can kind of see when things are not working, and see when things are not fair, and see when there's things that are causing harm. And somehow adults at some point can tune some of that out, which can lead to a lot of ableism and a lot of exclusionary
Yes.
practices as well. So anyway, I love that. So let me let you keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt, but when I hear your story, it just kind of
No, please
resonates with
jump
me
in.
really deeply.
I love when it's conversational. Anyhow, I learned so much about good teaching without being aware of that was happening, because teaching wasn't really on my radar. Um, and probably, like, potentially because my mother was a teacher, and you never want to do exactly what your parents do.
Right,
And
right.
but then I had the chance to develop a drama program for autistic students, and I had a theater degree and anthropology history minor. Like, I've always been fascinated by people, um, and then I was engaging in sort of this play through drama with autistic students. And of course, I had read all the current literature at the time that talked about, like, lack of imagination and,
Mm, mhm,
difficulties
mhm.
with theory of mind. And I'm having the most fun of my life. Like, these children are so imaginative. And I just loved what was happening. I loved that. And I realized this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I got a teaching degree. And almost immediately I began teaching in a program for autistic children within my school board. I've been doing that for a little over this. I think this is my 16th year, 15th year, 16th year. I'm terrible at math, but it's been a while that I've been in this program. And yeah, during that time, I went back to get my Ph.D. I wrote my first book, The Autism Lens, which was very much inspired by insights from my students and the things that I was seeing. And one of the main messages of that book is, like, sort of the adult responsibility to be the ones to bend and try to see from somebody else's perspective.
Mm, mhm.
However, I was not yet diagnosed at that point. There's maybe a page and a half on rewards I would rewrite or get rid of completely. Like,
Mm.
there's some things that I would change in light of, we're always growing and learning. And
I
um,
mean, that's the point of this. This really should be a journey, and it's one that, no matter where someone is in their journey, the idea is, like, how do we do better? I mean, it's that
yes,
that that Maya Angelou quote. It's to do the
yeah,
best you can until you know better. Then when you know
yeah,
better, do better. I think back to my own journey as a father, or anything that I've ever
yeah,
done, and think about, that I'm a huge proponent for
mhm,
curiosity, right? Like,
yes.
continuing to be curious, continuing to learn,
Mhm.
continuing to realize, like, I don't know everything, and I know less than I think I know about
Well,
anything, you
I
know?
think that makes the best teachers.
Right, right.
Curiosity is everything.
Yeah, agreed, agreed,
And
agreed.
that's what my first few years, I tried to do it sort of by the book, the way I thought that
Mm,
teachers were supposed to be. And it was not very natural to me, first of all.
mm,
But I remember a moment I had a student, and uh, when I moved to this location, because I taught the same program but in two different locations. And when I moved to the second location, I was taking over for a teacher who had been working with the students for like 2.5 years, some of them. So one of those students was very, very difficult to win over. Understandably, he had a
mhm, mhm.
relationship, a connection.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember he kept checking in with the wonderful child and youth worker that I have been so lucky to work with for most of my career. And he kept saying, "Do you like her?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I like Miss Dymond very much." And um, it wasn't until I heard him telling the other students that he really wanted to try rock climbing. And this was a student, maybe 12, 13. Uh, and, you know, things weren't as litigious at the beginning of my teaching career. And
Mm,
I
mhm,
talked to my principal, I called around, and there was a rock climbing place nearby that advertised having experience doing it for, like, children's birthday parties, students with special needs. I hate that terminology.
mm,
Um,
mhm.
but I arranged a trip to go rock climbing. And when I announced it to the class, the student looked up at me and he said, "No one's ever listened to me before." And like, it's still,
Yeah,
I think about
yeah.
it, I
Wow.
immediately get teary. I
Yeah,
get like
yeah.
goosebumps because like we know as adults we should listen to students.
Right,
We know
right,
that
right.
everyone likes to feel listened to, but that was such a visceral moment where I began to think like we micromanage children, especially children who the system considers to be lacking or in need of something
Mm.
different with special needs, all of these ways that we label students. So often we are taking away opportunities from them to have autonomy, to have agency, to develop the skills we actually say that we think
Right,
like we
right.
want them to have.
Right, right, right.
We don't
You
give
know,
them
it
those
reminds
choices.
me of the Alfie Kohn quote about, kids learn to make decisions by making decisions. Yet so
Yes.
often we take away that autonomy of children being able to make decisions and tell you, what
Yes.
they like or how they feel. Yeah, it's amazing.
And how often do we as adults, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers, not listen
Right,
when the children say things like, I don't want to go and do that. I
right,
don't want, and instead we say,
right,
like, don't say it in that tone. Like,
right,
are we
right,
listening to the substance of what they're saying? Are we
right,
are we allowing them to make choices for themselves sometimes? Like
right.
um anyhow, I just went off onto a tangent and I can't remember where I was in my story. So
Well, so let me pause for a second and just again, if you're watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from, and just I'll share real quickly. We've got a frequent and welcome visitor here from Australia joining us, and of course, it is tomorrow morning in Australia. We're a little later than usual, so I'm glad this time still works out for you. We also have another one here in Canada. Chantel is actually our lead Canadian volunteer. So good to have you here, Chantel, as well. But again, if you're watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from, or if, as we have this discussion, you have things to add or you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We like to do these live because we like to have the opportunity to, hear your voice and to have you weigh in as well. So let me kind of getting your entryway into this, and of course you get into schools and you're a teacher. Um, and again, you shared that you were diagnosed later, and which is something that happens. I think more and more frequently. It's interesting that very often, I'm hearing from families that we work with and support, and parents who begin to realize their own diagnoses through supporting their children, and meeting so many people that have been diagnosed so much later, and even, I mean, today, I mean, you would like to think like we're doing a better job, and so many of these evaluations, we went through a process of having my daughter evaluated for ADHD, and the initial evaluation, a standard, instrument that they use, really looked like it was designed to find ADHD in a 6-year-old hyperactive boy,
yeah,
not a teenage girl. But so
exactly.
often, that's what we find is that the approach is being taken. And of course, we ended up kind of, finding a neurodiversity affirming, therapist and evaluator. And it turns out, very, very different results from that.
Yeah.
But you got into this and you began as a teacher. When did you? I mean, I think we probably go back to when you first saw the issue with your brother. But when you went into school, what did you begin to notice in terms of ableism, in terms of exclusionary practices? What began to enter your sphere of concern that you were seeing?
So once I was teaching, again, I'm supporting students who come from a variety of schools, and I get to teach them 1 day a week for 3 years. And then I have two sort of consulting days where I visit different schools. And so I see a lot of different things. And then I'm hearing from my students different experiences, experiences of having a genuine question being perceived as, undermining a teacher's authority. And so they're not answered. The question goes unanswered and they get spoken to harshly and they feel embarrassed. It's not understanding sensory differences
Mm,
that students might have or the supports that they need. Like, you have to wear that uniform sweater Why? If it's
Right.
uncomfortable, if they can't learn when they're in the sweater,
Right.
it's, so some of these things are very, what would seem like very, very small, but they're not. They're
Right.
not small,
Right.
and they effectively work to silence students and to also separate them from their ability to advocate for themselves when
Mm-hmm.
we don't respond and listen. It would be things like, um, you know, assuming the worst of students, assuming that they don't want to do well. I always go back to Ross Greene,
Right.
making assumptions about motivation or effort. Um, just, and I know teachers and I believe they want the best for students. I
Right.
believe
Right.
they want everyone to be included, but we're in a cycle of using what was either done to us as students, not
Yep.
done
Yep.
for us or
Yep.
with us, but done
Mm-hmm.
to us.
Mm-hmm.
These are the sort of traditional ways, and they go unquestioned often. Like, what are the assumptions behind these practices, and even things that seem to be potentially benign or seem like they could be fun, like reward systems,
Right.
are
Right.
not fun for everybody.
That's right.
They're
That's right.
damaging to
That's right.
everybody.
That's right. And they kill intrinsic motivation, and they lead to
Yes.
anxiety. They lead to shame. Like there's a whole body of research. Yet,
Mhm.
these things are still really common approaches, and very often, like these things that we're doing to people, because that's what
Mhm.
this is really
Mhm.
about. This isn't about doing things with people, but these things that we're doing to
Yes.
people. Not only are they ineffective, they're often at the root of increased stress, anxiety, and dysregulation.
And for
Um,
everybody.
yeah.
I also teach graduate students, so they're adult learners,
Mm-hmm.
and we're unpacking these practices. We're considering these things. Did we benefit or not? Because if we benefited, often we never questioned it,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so we start to really disentangle what is going on and how my own experience might be different than somebody else's, and what does that really say? And if it leaves the majority of people anxious or left out or effectively experiencing exclusion, is it a good
Right.
practice? Right.
Right. Right.
And yeah, so I just began to notice these things.
Yeah.
I was hearing from students about not feeling understood or feeling embarrassed, humiliated in classrooms. And I don't think teachers want students to feel that way. There's like a disconnect that is
Right.
happening.
Right.
And then I went back for my PhD, and really, I remember a really striking moment as well that happened. I was in a really wonderful class, and everyone in this group were teachers or had been teachers and believed in inclusion and equity, diversity, all of these things. And we did this activity where we were given post-it notes, and we all had to write down different related words to education. So I think I wrote down things like constructivism, and I definitely wrote down, students. I think I said students with autism at the time. Now I use identity first language, but
Mhm.
so that, and uh, so I think students with autism and maybe special education. I don't know, something like that. And we had to create as a group a mind map, and everyone had several turns to rearrange post-its as they saw fit. And then you kind of rotated, walked around. And I connected autistic students and constructivism and play and like experiential learning all together. And every time I came back to the front of the table, autistic students were off to the side, like
Mm,
relegated to the side,
mm,
connected only to, I think, schooling.
mm,
And I thought, even
mm,
in this class,
mm, mhm.
with people who purport to believe in inclusion and who I
Right,
truly believe
right,
do,
right,
they
right,
can't conceptualize
right, right.
how these students fit in with the whole.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
yeah.
visually seeing this play out. And it just got me really thinking, like, what are we doing wrong in teacher education
Mm, mhm.
that teachers don't know
Yeah.
how
Well,
to,
yeah.
don't conceptualize how to teach
Right,
everyone
right,
together?
right. Yeah, and I mean, the irony there, of course, is that I mean, that as well could represent an autistic student who then is moved to a segregated setting, and not seen with all of those connections. So, I mean, it just so, if you see it, you see it, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so ironic that
Mhm.
everybody, and I think that the higher ed issue, this is one that I think deeply concerns me because I think that we're still decades behind in higher ed. I mean,
Yes.
what people are learning and what they're coming out with, and whether it be, I mean, there's still a lot of. Oh, I'm interested in your opinion on this. I mean, but in my opinion, there's still a lot of like ableism and
Yes.
dependence on approaches that are not working. What are your thoughts on higher ed? Be
Uh,
more hopeful if you are. I
well,
just
okay, I will say this. Um, in 2023, I began teaching my own courses that I designed to really challenge and look at neuronormativity and
Mhm.
normativity in all forms in education. And I am so inspired by the conversations I'm having with graduate teacher candidates and also other students in education because I now teach the same course in a couple of departments. So some of the students are in social work, psychology, like different, not just teachers. One is
Mhm.
exclusively teachers, and one is a wonderful mix. And when you start having these conversations and really taking that deep dive into, well, what are the assumptions behind this?
Right,
Who benefits? Who does
right,
not?
right, right,
And
right.
ask those questions and create an environment where students can express like, I don't know that I buy into this. Like I remember having a teacher candidate say, but how can you have order and structure without rewards and punishment?
Mhm,
And
mhm, mhm.
I went like, all right, let's go into breakout rooms and let's discuss that question. What do you
Right,
think?
right,
I'm not going
right.
to tell you right away because I don't want you just to tell me what I want to hear. I want you to really think about it and
Mm,
then
mhm, mhm,
question like, what is the assumption there? Your assumption is
mhm, mhm.
that you can't have structure
Right,
and
right,
order without rewards and punishments.
right,
Why?
right.
Let's really dig into that and see if we can conceptualize better.
Mhm,
You
mhm,
know,
mhm.
because otherwise, again, we're just going to keep teaching the way we've always been taught, the way we've been taught to teach. We have to question and experience different.
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, the way teachers have been taught to teach, the way that they were taught, the way that they may have been raised. I mean,
Yes.
these practices that are, in my opinion, and I think yours, not working and leading to a lot of really, I mean, harm and poor outcomes for a lot of kids, especially neurodivergent kids,
Mhm.
kids that have experienced a lot of trauma. A lot of the kids that are most often on the other side of a lot of the punitive exclusionary discipline,
Mhm.
they're not working, and it really, yeah. But I mean, so often, I mean, this is how people were raised. I mean, I
Yeah.
was raised learning that I made bad choices, and
Mhm.
but kind of understanding a little of the neuroscience behind human behavior, you begin to see behavior differently, and you see behavior
Yes.
differently, and you have an opportunity to respond differently. You understand human development, and I think this is
Mhm.
a big gap. I mean,
Mhm.
with a lot of educators that don't really necessarily have a good sense of what is appropriate developmentally, and we
Yeah.
put expectations on
Yeah.
kids, any kid that's not developmentally appropriate.
Well, and again, that idea of standardization
Right.
is so like faulty as a premise just to
Yep.
begin with.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
agreed, agreed.
yeah, yeah,
And not one that makes for a stronger world or a stronger
yeah,
class or a strong,
yeah.
I mean, when we focus on that, I think it's really to the detriment of all.
Yes.
Much like I would say that I think inclusion can be beneficial to all
Mhm.
when it is done well, and I think when you have things like that, they can be, I think, harmful to
Mhm.
all, as well. So tell me about, as an educator, I mean, some of the kind of, we talk a lot here because that's a big focus of our work about, punitive and exclusionary discipline. Talk to me about some of the exclusionary practices that you began to see in school, and
Mhm.
how you have either shifted or been influential in helping others to make the shift away from these practices, because they become so part of the things we do.
Mhm.
And even, again, I mean, we talked about like the rewards aspect of this, but even when you look at just strictly the very punitive things,
Yes.
there's a whole lot of harm that's done. So what was your journey like on that? When did you begin to become concerned about, these kind of punitive exclusionary things happening to kids? And when did you begin to find other ways of supporting children and moving away
Yeah.
from that?
And I mean, I'm still finding ways, right? But
Mm-hmm.
certainly my first couple of years when I was trying to be strict, and like I was getting into so many more power struggles. Like now, like
How did
it's
those
so
usually
much
go for you, those power struggles? I mean,
never well.
right. Because you get an inflexible adult and an inflexible
Yes.
kid, and what's going
Yes.
to happen, right?
Oh,
It's
exactly.
yeah,
Everybody's
yeah,
dysregulated. And
right.
I learned so much very quickly. Like you have to sort of learn and reflect. And I did a couple of things that really helped me to make some serious shifts that I've carried forward. And one was, of course, being reflective. uh, and I decided to have like every year I sort of had a different mantra of what I wanted to focus on to as a teacher to sort of improve. And so year two was the year that it was children who need love the most often ask for it in the most unloving ways, which is from a Russell Barkley book that, a wise teacher said to him. And it helped me because there was one particular student that I was having difficulty connecting with. And so I would sort of say that on my way to work, and it just helped me to sort of pause and become more aware of my triggers and not react from a reactive place.
Right.
It helped me to every morning to make time to connect with that student, where I'd be saying, hey, let's do this together. Why don't we make a flag for the classroom? What do you think should be on it? Should we have a class motto? What do you think it should be? And I sat and like worked with the student and would say, okay, what you want me to color the letters? Okay, what color should I use? And just really seeking lots of their ideas. And, I would do things like we're coming back from recess and I lock the classroom before we leave. And so I would say, oh, can you run ahead and open the classroom? Just really trying to give trust and leadership. And it just, the combination of that plus bringing in lots of co-regulation strategies into my classroom, where we're deliberately having these moments where we practice deep breathing and we practice, let's see if who likes stretching, who likes this form of mindfulness, who likes this.
Maybe a little movement, right?
It's like, I feel so much better doing this.
Yeah.
And then I also realized how powerful it is to get students thinking about what do I like and identifying their own preferences.
Right.
Like that. I'm going to just introduce you to like a smorgasbord of regulation strategies. Try it, see what you think. Let me know. You can hate it. That doesn't bother me. Like, I want you to find things that work for you. And so those were some changes that I made quite early on that began to shift dynamics. And then,
and let me ask you, in that process, one of the things I think people find challenging sometimes, because I'm totally with you. I mean that quote about the kids that need connection the most are the ones that often have the hardest time kind of showing that. I mean that ties right to like the ACEs research, right? I mean it ties right to what we know today about trauma. That people that come from trauma, that come from adversity, and there's a huge intersection with disability, neurodivergence, and trauma as well. But the people that really need that connection the most often really do struggle to make those connections, and that can be difficult because you might see yourself as an educator and a helper, and I care and I want to support, but a kid is pushing back because you've really got to get that barrier down, and it's real. So not taking things personally. I'd love to hear, because that's hard for all of us. I mean, we all can take things personally, even if cognitively I know, like, okay, this is a kid that's experienced this is coming from here. We can still take it personally. And some people have their own trauma as well. And some of these things may trigger them even as adults. So
I can totally still be triggered. I just try not to react on it. Like I try. I expect higher self-regulation of myself than I do of children.
Right. And you have a more developed cortex, right? And exactly. You have more capability there to start with, but it doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to hold it together, because just like the children you support, you have a fluctuating capacity. It's not the same every day, and there's a lot that can affect it. But did you find anything useful? Because again, I mean, I think that, especially if you're, kind of early in your career, even if you've heard some of this, oh, well, trauma, but you might not really understand, like, well, this kid said this to me. And so how did you find ways to help you, not take things personally and to continue to persist even when pushed away? Because the kid that really needs that connection may be pushing really hard against it. What did you find that was useful?
Well, just knowing that it will come,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, every time you have a moment of like profound connection, it reminds you that it's possible, and you
Right.
carry that into other interactions. And often sort of, so I do regular conferencing with students.
Mm-hmm.
They set their own goals, so they'll have a school goal, something that they want to work on at school, something they want to work on at home. They self-assess, we talk about it, and I go, okay, how's that feeling for you? Like what's hard about the goal? Is anything becoming easier?
Mm.
What's helping? What do you think would help? um, and often students are not used to A, setting their own goals,
Mm-hmm.
B, they're not used to adults saying, well, what do you think would help this problem? And
Mm.
then listening to what they
Like
say.
actively working with them and
Yes.
sharing what rather than telling them?
And like
Huh.
that was a big shift for me too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then making sort of okay, well, is there anything that I can do in this setting that would help you?
Right.
Like, and then I'm going to do that thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then once they see you've listened, you've responded, oh, you actually take them seriously, you honor their voice. Suddenly, it's like the floodgates open, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's this thing that I want to improve, like, in the environment, and there's this thing, and there's this thing. And then the openness that comes from that, and the sort of vulnerable conversations on
Right.
both sides, and being
Yeah.
able to listen without, sometimes adults, especially with neurodivergent and or disabled students, will say, like, have sort of like, oh, don't say that, you can try harder, you'll
Right.
get
Right.
through it.
Right. Right. Right.
But being able to just sit with a student and say, that does sound really hard,
Yeah.
that sounds tough,
Yeah.
and like allow their emotion to be.
Yeah. And validate their
Yeah.
feelings, right? I mean,
Yeah.
too often, and it doesn't mean you have to agree with what they did or what happened, but you can still validate somebody's feelings.
Well, it's like therapists, they're
Yeah.
supposed to have that unconditional positive regard, right? And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean we're not challenging students to grow or think in different ways,
Right.
but we're going to give space to their experience. And then, um, like I had a student yesterday say, oh, I didn't do this part because I was feeling lazy. And I was like, I don't think laziness is a thing. And I said, like, I think often what people think of as laziness is either you are really tired and you need a break and that's okay, or there's something that's hard about it. There's something
Right.
getting in the
Right.
way.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
just like this sense of relief washed over him. And
Mm.
I talked about how, like, when I get home, I crash. I'm very exhausted at the
Mm.
end of a day with students.
Mm.
I like
Yeah. Yeah.
I would not be able to come home and do homework. I think homework's terrible, but
Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
you have to listen to your body. That's a
Yeah.
really important. That's more important than homework, than all of
Mm.
these things
Mhm.
that are really
Mhm.
part of compliance training, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
and sometimes you just need to say those things and get them to think about it and realize, like, okay, like, it's
Yeah.
not about pleasing people,
Well, and part of what I'm hearing, from you, that I think is so important is it's about being authentic. It's
Mhm.
about, all relationships are about, kind of, serve and return, right? I mean, it's not just, but we often end up in these compliance-based approaches where we just want to, kind of push things down and have people do
Yeah,
the things we want them to do. I mean, I don't even like the language around it. I don't like,
yeah,
the idea of behavior management. I'm going to
yeah,
manage the way that, I don't like that. But I think that authentic piece is really important. And, so often, I think that, that doesn't happen. We don't look at, kids. And I think the other thing you were getting at is just this need to be persistent, be persistent and be consistent, like
mhm,
keep coming. I feel like it's easy sometimes, and this sounds bad, but, people sometimes give up and, never, ever, ever, ever give up on a kid,
yeah,
the kid that people give up on is a kid that a lot of people have failed already.
mhm,
They haven't found the adults in their life to be safe. They
mhm.
haven't found them to be predictable. They haven't had the experience of feeling validated. And, again, I mean, believe in, the child that no one else seems to believe in, I think is really critical to
Yes.
all this.
Because our beliefs can become internalized limiting beliefs for the child.
Right.
They set trajectories. There is research that shows that, you know, even as early as kindergarten, teacher assumptions about capabilities, um, become this pattern of tracking or streaming
Hmm.
that like by kindergarten are set pathways.
Right, right, right. Yeah,
It's
I remember that, kind of the idea that our thoughts affect our actions, and when we're talking about supporting another human being, our actions then affect their thoughts of themselves, and their thoughts of themselves affect their actions. We create
yeah,
this circle that, by having, by not having expectations that
mhm,
are looking at someone in their humanity, or by seeing them as a problem, it
yes,
affects everything we do, and that affects the way that, so that the feedback loop to that, I think, is really powerful in a very negative way
mhm,
if we're not, looking at, someone, kind of in their full humanity, I guess is what I'm.
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's incredibly hard because systems are constrained. Teachers have long checklists of things they feel they need to accomplish. There's
Right.
not time allotted, to really do a lot of thinking and to,
Mm-hmm.
things would be so different if there was more time to really reflect on the job. And,
Right.
but speed is so damaging. The concept of speed, the privileging of speed,
Mm-hmm.
learners think speedy responses make someone intelligent, and it's just speed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also why we privilege things like rewards and punishments, because they are a speedy way to get
Right.
surface level
Right. Right.
adjustments,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
learning takes time.
Right. And you hear, well, this works, right? And of course, what works in the short term is not solving, challenges in the long term. And kind of back to a kind of an Alfie Cohen, I mean, works for whom? I mean,
Yes,
who's this working for? Is this working
yes.
for your need to assert control and to try to, force compliance? Or
Mhm,
is this actually helping a child to develop a skill, understand what's difficult for them? I mean,
mhm,
so often we focus on, a child when there's a behavior that, is concerning someone. We focus on the child, and we don't really even focus on, environmentally what might be going on, or what might
yeah,
be stressors, or there's so much more. We have a question here,
mhm,
Chantel put in the chat. And again, feel free to put questions or comments in the chat as we talk today. What would you say to those who are trying to bring these ideas into their school and getting a lot of pushback? And we see, of course, that happens with parents. We have a
mhm,
lot of parents that are part of our community that are on these journeys and are out, taking these ideas to their schools and trying to affect change. We also see this from educators. And she adds, many end up leaving the field. So a lot of the educators may, and we see this. We see
yeah. Research shows
educators that
that
are
too.
trying to affect change, and the system itself is resistant.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on, how we can, better support people that are trying to bring these
Mhm.
ideas, or what other changes are necessary to help us get there?
Oh, I have so many thoughts on that, and
Okay.
at different levels. So, obviously, as an individual, if you are a teacher within your own classroom, you have a lot of freedom to do things within the four walls of your classroom,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and implement things that are aligned with these sort of values. Um, it's also very important to know what is legally expected of you and be able to justify decisions and be able to speak to how this meets these things within the curriculum, things like that. But you can do so much in your own classroom, and the proof is in the pudding. Like when people start to see the students in your classroom being able to solve problems and make suggestions and do things because you create a space for that democratic process for talking about problems. For one thing I do is I do lots of little mini lessons. So before a work period or before group work, we'll say like what sometimes feels hard during group work. What can be hard about it? Okay, I'm going to write down all of your ideas. What do you think would help? Again, I write down all of their ideas. And it's a way of showing them like you have ideas that can help you, they can help other people, we can help one another. Um, and they start to develop this sense of like we can solve problems. Again,
Hmm.
it takes time. And even when there are problems that come up, when there are interpersonal conflicts, it's like we're always going to stop, talk about it when people are ready and regulated and in a place
Right.
where we can
Right.
have
Right.
those conversations. But I'm not going to fast forward. That is where the learning happens. That is where we're developing skills that make this easier as children age. And parents will start to see the difference, and other teachers will start to see. So there's sort of this individual approach. Do what you can, do what good you can in your spaces.
Right.
It's also finding colleagues who are interested in these conversations, creating these sort of instructional alliances, partnerships.
Or colleagues that become curious because they're like,
yes,
oh,
what's going on? How's this working for you?
the student seems to be so much different than with you than me. We had a really difficult time. What are you doing? I mean, just even getting people to be curious can be a step in the right direction.
And we have to empathize with colleagues who are struggling too, because they're having difficulty. They're learners too, and like the learners in front of us in classrooms or around us in classrooms, no one likes to feel like they're not doing well.
Right.
We're all sort of struggling, and part of it is realizing it's not all on you to solve. Like, this has been the best gift that I've received as a teacher, is realizing I can work collaboratively with students, that like it's not all on me. And it doesn't mean we're going to solve everything. There are a lot of systemic barriers that come up for students that I am not going to be able to solve in a year. But again, children, their families know when you are there, when you are trying to support them, when you are working with them, it is a fundamental shift that, like, even if you can't solve everything, they know that you are treating them with dignity. They know that you honor their voice. Like, that is already going to make a difference, even if it's not addressing everything,
Right.
And then,
and that makes a difference for, I mean, and again, I'm a big believer, like, make a difference for a kid and you've made a difference in life worth making, right? So the effect that you can have on a single classroom and the time that you have allotted can really be meaningful.
Exactly. And obviously we want to also call for changes to the system. Like, there have to be changes from above. And this is where it can be really difficult, as Chantal was saying, because it can feel really heavy. And we also, it is okay at times to put down that mantle and know that other people are going to pick it up. Other people are doing this work as well. So there are not easy answers of how do we do it, but we start with our classroom. We find people. When we have colleagues who are really stressed out and at their max, we listen to them and we say, that sounds tough. We do the same sort of thing. That sounds tough. And find out what their concerns are, and try to use that Socratic questioning to get them really thinking about what do they want for students. And I will sometimes teach through stories, right? So I'll say, what, I had a student and they said that they felt really embarrassed one time by something that I did. And oh my goodness, I learned so much from that. Like, I'll just tell these stories, or, and show that, like, I don't know it all either. I'm still learning all the time. I'm still getting things wrong, and then aiming to do better, because the work of inclusion is iterative. There's not an end point, right? We're always sort of, what else? We're adding to what we already do well.
Right. And then asking questions about things that may be challenging, right? I mean, being curious about things that aren't going maybe the way that you're hoping they're going to go, but, being deeply curious and trying to figure out why, rather than making a decision and, assuming we know, really kind of continuing to dig, I think, is really important. So, again, a lot of your work has been around, pushing back against ableism and exclusionary practices. I want to kind of bring it back to your book for a second, because this is about kind of creating neurodiversity-affirming classrooms. And when we're creating neurodiversity-affirming classrooms, at the same time, I mean, put on the cape, you're fighting ableism, and you're helping to move away from exclusionary practices. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the book, why you decided to write this, and how it really factors into all of this work as well.
So I've been thinking, going back to that story with the Post-it notes, I've been thinking a lot about that, and how in sort of higher education, when we're teaching about teaching, we need to shift away from talking about, for instance, autistic students or students with ADHD in like a one-off class where we present them as so different than everybody else, needing something different, which I believe contributes to what we see in research, which is that teachers, feel very apprehensive. They're like, I don't know how to support the needs. I'm not ready for this. They're somebody else's responsibility, special educators, because of how we teach about them. We're not talking about expecting learner variability, but we should be expecting learner variability. My graduate classes have learner variability. It's sort of adjusting and being prepared to support a wide range of bodies, a wide range of processing needs, of communication preferences and abilities, like anticipating, so planning kind of proactively, part of universal design, but then also seeking and responding to what's coming up from students and carrying that forward in our practice. And realizing that many of the ways that we teach are based on particular conceptions of how a student should look or act. That is not really real. That is not, nor would it be particularly enriching for everybody to be like a robot, right? Like we can celebrate learner variability. We can make room for expertise that looks different. We can teach students that speed does not equal intelligence. Barbara Oakley uses this great analogy about racer brain and hiker brain. And, a racer brain almost can predict the question before you finish. They have the answer. They're calling it out maybe. But they're not noticing all the nuance necessarily. Whereas a hiker brain may take a bit longer to get there, but they're noticing the bunny rabbits, the flowers along the, taking in more information. And, unfortunately in education, we have a lot of practices that make it seem like one is more desirable than the other. Right.
So, yeah. I mean, just the core message here, right? There's no one right way to be human, right? There's no one right way of being. But I think sometimes the norms get built around that idea, and it's incredibly hard then for people that don't fit that, that mold.
And so throw it out in your classroom, right? Like I teach this both in elementary and graduate school, and it breaks my heart in graduate school that I will have reflections later from adults saying, I always thought I was tough, but I just have a hiker brain. Like, why aren't we teaching students to and getting curious about students and asking them, what happens for you? And tell me about your learning. And, here's an accessibility tool. Everybody should try this out. Like I do direct instruction and here, let's learn about Pomodoro Kitty, which is like the Pomodoro technique, but it's a really cute website and students of all ages love it. Or bionic reading font, or speech to text, text to speech. All of these things are for everybody. We gatekeep accessibility, and we shouldn't, because even in graduate school, I will have teacher candidates who've gotten all the way through to graduate school, and they go, "Oh my goodness." Listening to the reading was the first time I haven't spent hours agonizing and rereading. I processed better, and I had no idea. Why don't they have an idea? Because we don't teach these things, and it hasn't been an option, and we don't get students thinking about. We're trying to fit them into a mold that nobody, very few people fit into that mold anyhow.
Right.
Throw out the mold.
I want to actually take this in a slightly different direction for a second. As you shared, you were late diagnosed, autistic ADHD. And I'm going to guess that, some of this for you may have come from, as you mentioned, kind of the starting point of the journey in relation to your brother. But, I'm going to guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but, throughout school, that you may not have been supported appropriately because, you're, there was not, you, again, being late diagnosed, may not have had the understanding of some of the things that would have been really helpful. Was that part of your journey as well? And has that been, has your own diagnoses then influence, kind of your thoughts and understanding about how to better support other neurodivergent learners?
So certainly it has. Academically, like I found a lot to be easy up until like the end of high school. So
Mm,
university was more of a like rude awakening because I had no idea how to study. I really had no idea how to write an essay. I just somehow like managed to get through and like
yeah.
do those things well without really like nobody explicitly taught me, and I kind of wish they had. Um, uh, and you know, again, having a good memory is another thing that school privilege if you're testing, right? Like,
Mm,
and
mhm,
so I
mhm.
was good at those things. Certainly I could have been pushed and learned a lot more a lot earlier, if things had been a little bit different that way. I struggled more socially,
Mm,
especially middle school. But I think what late diagnosis especially has brought me is like an awareness of my nervous system that I didn't have.
mm, mhm.
You know, I like I said, like I still crash sometimes after work, but it was routinely in high school. I would come home and just like take these really long naps, and I didn't really know why I was so burnt out all the time,
Mm,
and
mhm, mhm.
I didn't. I sometimes like I knew I have very vivid memories of deliberately masking, so hiding the things that were hard
Yep,
for
yep,
me.
yep.
But also in retrospect as an adult, there's also times that you didn't even realize you were doing it, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
and but I was very fortunate. Like my parents are wonderful and nurtured my creativity. So there were a lot of things in school that I found really boring, and I would just be like, I'm going to write a play instead. Like I would just sort of take ownership,
Yeah.
and but that also taught me like this is so important as a teacher to have options and let students express themselves in ways that work for them. But I like I was empowered to do those things because I had parents who really inspired creativity for me.
Mm, mhm,
um, and so I would ask teachers like, oh, I hate these topics, can I do this? And
mm,
I
mhm.
was given a lot of grace. I had some wonderful teachers that perhaps I wouldn't have been given if I didn't look the way that I do. And
Mm,
not many
mhm,
people can
mhm.
probably get away with being like, these topics are terrible. And
Right,
I'm sure I
right,
didn't
right,
phrase it exactly like that,
right,
but
right.
I I created challenge for myself because I would have been bored, right?
Mm, mhm,
Otherwise.
mhm.
And um, so things like that. And again, the social stuff was difficult, and I didn't really tell teachers
Mhm,
what was going on. So I didn't get
mhm,
support for that. And sort of the mental health things that went
mm,
along with that,
mm.
that now I can
Did
process.
you feel like, kind of, post-diagnosis that, like, things made sense now that didn't
Like,
make sense before? Yeah.
yes, because there's all these like disparate things that it's like, why did I react that way or not
Mm,
react? Like I'm a big
right.
freeze. Like I have a freeze
Mm, mhm, mhm.
type of personality in any sort of conflict or
Right,
thing where I just can't figure out what to do. Like, and why can't I figure it out to do? Like
mm,
I'm supposedly so smart. Again,
right,
all of the
right.
limiting beliefs, and when
Yeah.
things challenge that, it's like, why couldn't I do this? Why can't I get through this? Why do I just shut down and like, um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
freeze and
like get
shutdown.
emotional,
Yeah, I mean, I think freeze and shutdown kids often fall between the cracks because, the child that goes into fight or flight, the child that has a big
Yeah,
behavior,
yeah,
that child is identified as a child that needs, and not to say that they will get the support they need, but they're identified as someone who may need some additional supports. But
mhm,
I think very often the kids that are more kind of in the vein of shutdown
yeah.
are kids that sometimes fly under everyone's radar
Oh,
because, well,
exactly.
their grades are okay, and
Yeah,
but people don't understand that they have
mhm,
needs that need to be supported. I always worry a lot
yeah.
about shutdown kids because
Me
I think
too.
there's a tremendous amount of those children that are
Yeah,
overlooked and
yeah.
not really well supported.
And like and so it's sort of that. Am I lucky that I have my meltdowns in
Right,
private? Like
right, 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 right.
when people
Yeah,
aren't knowing what's going. Like it took me into my 30s before I was able to say to like close friends and even family, like this is hard for me. Like
right, right.
I have like pushed through, which
Hmm.
also you know has contributed to burnout
Yeah,
and other
yeah,
things. And it's just
yeah.
it is good to be at a place in my life and an age, and with new knowledge where I am able to say like this is hard for me, I need help,
Hmm,
I can't do this,
hmm,
and that
hmm.
is okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Right, right. So I want to pause for a second and then just let folks know, if you're watching live and you have a question or excuse me, a question or comment, feel free to put that in the chat. We've only got a few more minutes here, but we certainly have time for a couple of questions or comments if you have any. But I'm going to pivot a little here and ask you a question. So,
Yeah.
I've seen, autistic ADHD, autistic, neurodivergent educators who, I think, have been really successful in supporting neurodivergent students.
Yeah.
However, the system, the school or the environment sometimes is not too friendly, at least in my experience in the conversations I've had, to neurodivergent educators. And I'm just kind of curious if you have thoughts or experience on that. And I think that's important. I mean, is we want to bring in more educators and more diverse educators as well, that may have through their own lived experience, I think, have some real potential of working with children that others may not immediately understand. I mean, when you find someone that understands you, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how is the education in your experience? I mean, how is education in terms of supporting neurodivergent educators?
Oh, I'm writing a paper on this actually at the moment.
Oh, really?
And,
Okay.
yeah, just it is very hard to be in a pathologizing space.
Right.
When you know that the framing of, for instance, autistic children is also how you are seen. And there's a fundamental flaw in this right from the get-go, how we see students. It is very easy to burn out because you are seeing all of the time these sort of microaggressions, and sometimes not just macro macroaggressions. And I am someone who has very acute injustice sensitivity, and many of us do.
Me too. Right? Which probably explains why I quit my job when I was in my late 40s as start a nonprofit to advocate for kids, right? The justice drive, so I think, is really critical. Yeah.
And so, like, first of all, community is one of the most important things. So finding that, I have lots of ideas for. I would like to, in higher education, in teacher education, to have like sort of a cohort who, of course, is in all of the classes with everybody, but a cohort of neurominority and or disabled teacher candidates, so we can talk about and problematize those experiences and provide community and work through like issues in practica or issues with profs who aren't understanding, like accommodating, and because there is this erasure of disability in higher education, teacher education, and the teaching profession more generally. A lot of disabled educators burn out or are sort of forced out even because these systems that purport to be about like inclusion and like, oh, let's teach children they can do anything. They don't actually believe that. They don't make room for disabled.
I had a conversation with a teacher recently, kind of in that same vein. And I mean, you see it happen for sure. And I have to imagine, the stress that would come from, and again, the injustices for students, the ableism that you see being applied to students, like the internalization of that as well.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It is, but it's like the kids are all right. Like the conversations that I have with students of any age, whether they're elementary students or they're adult learners, like I love talking about these topics with them and seeing their thoughts and how do we transform things. So let's talk about the hard parts. Let's identify the problems. Let's name those things. And let's also talk about and identify ways we can all do better. That sort of shift towards transformation has been really healing for me. So finding those spaces, I think, is important for any of us who are sort of have these positionalities within the systems. And again, taking breaks, taking care of yourself. Like I definitely could do a better job of slowing down and resourcing myself. But I have wonderful friends who remind me to do that because yeah, like especially in these times, like you alluded to earlier, like
Yeah, sure.
our nervous systems all need a break, right? We
Right,
need
right.
to
My nervous system would like to travel to Canada right now, but
you
that's
are
a whole nother
welcome.
conversation.
Come and
Or
visit. I got a
Australia.
guest
I've got
room.
friends in
Yeah.
Australia there too, apparently. So,
Yeah.
speaking of which, it's a good time for a question here from one of our Australian colleagues and friends. Do you still support teachers working with older students, those close to leaving school, ensuring that they have a kit bag of skills to leave school with?
So, so my day job is, of course, with elementary school teachers and students, and then who I teach at the university. Some of them are in secondary, yes, so in high school. And I do like neurodivergent coaching. So I've got some high school students who are clients. So yeah, I think that there is remarkable commonality in good teaching strategies because I do the same things with graduate students that I do with elementary students. Like obviously the level to which we go into things, the materials are different, but again, both settings, I do accessibility tools. I have students sort of set goals and self-assess, think about their learning and sort of share with me what's going on for them. I do mindfulness breaks. I do basically there's sort of this like bi-directional impact. I'll test something out in one place and go, wow, that really works. Let's see if I can bring it into this other place. And part of it is me trying to model like these things are possible.
Right.
For teacher candidates so that they know they can go into the field and do the same thing.
Yeah.
But then they actually are quite transformative because often they haven't had those experiences, but they work equally well. And like this like, let's nurture well-being for everyone. I'm going to create opportunities for choice and voice. And like, what do you want to learn about? Next week, we're going to be talking about this topic. There's 3 possible readings. Pick the one that works for you. Like be prepared to discuss because we're going to learn from each other anyways. Like even if you didn't do the other 2, that's okay. Right. Like that's the point. We're going to learn with and from each other. Yeah. So, but I would say the thing that I think a lot of teachers don't realize about universal design, like they think it is just that sort of front loading order and like planning for everybody. But I believe that the most important part, and this is where the resistance lies, is in that responsiveness. Right. Because you are seeking out the voice and you're saying, okay, some of you said that, I rushed through. I am going to make sure that I build in more space, and explicitly speaking to that. So it is the eliciting of what can I do better? How can we change this environment? How can we co-create expectations and honoring that process? And it may sound like a lot of work, but I've actually found it is like so much easier when you let students take the lead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about, Marion's question and unfortunately, I think a lot of students are failed year after year. And you get students that are nearing time to leave school who have many of the same goals on their IEP that they had since elementary school and have not been, and not have not been well served, have not been supported. And part of what I'm hearing from you, I think, and I believe as well, is like, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see. It's heartbreaking to understand that somehow along the way, and we have kids that, might be completing classes that are, aligned with the grade level that really aren't, and really haven't gotten either the skills, academic, background or any of that. But I'd like to think that it's never too late. And even as you have students that are nearing that time, the things that we can do can still make a difference in going forward. But it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see. And I've gone through like histories of kids looking at kind of records and seeing like, this is the same thing we saw 8 years ago. And the things we were doing were not working. And making shifts like this, I think, are so critical because there are so many kids out there that have so much capability and ability to
Yes.
do things, but it's never seen because the box that we have there for them is not a good fit.
Well,
And we
and what
keep
do
trying
we
to put them in the
do?
same
Yeah.
box year after year.
What do we do as teachers, just in general? This is
Right.
generalization, but what do we do when we think a student is not capable or is struggling with something? Frequently, it's let's water it down.
Right.
Let's give them really boring
Expect
worksheets.
less. Right.
Let's like expect less. Let's deprive them of opportunities to develop cognitive tools and like
Yeah.
rich ways of thinking their classmates are developing.
Yeah.
And if you were to, so sort of this idea of the bell curve, right, where you have only a small few at this side who are really high achieving, a small few at the other end who are, you should expect, will be underachievers, and then these sort of middle ground. If you mapped out who gets rewards, it would be similar. Like the high achievers always get the reward, almost always, but then there's this middle section. Could go either way. They're always anxious. They're comparing themselves. They really don't want to be at the bottom. And then you have the ones we routinely don't give things to.
Right. And why bother at that point, right?
Deny the opportunity. And it's like how anyone learns is usually through experience and connecting and rich opportunities to think about your background knowledge, think about what you know, explore. Like we always give those to the top few percent, right? And then we deny these rich learning opportunities to the bottom. So it becomes this, teacher fulfilled prophecy.
Right.
That's that set trajectory, right? And the limiting beliefs become internalized.
Right. And then we have a broken system. And it's not the kids that are broken. It's the system that's broken, and we've got to change it. I mean, it goes back to the old, the quote about, when a plant's not doing well or flower's not blooming, you don't change the flower. You change the environment. You get it the things it needs to thrive. And so often we're not getting kids the things they need to thrive, but we're continuing to see them become less engaged, less interested. Well, we have about reached our time here, so we're going to have to wrap this conversation up. But I do want to give you an opportunity. If there's anything you want to share, if you have anything exciting going on, or events that you're doing, anything like that you want to share. But also, I'd like to get your kind of final thoughts. What kind of, again, ground in the work that you're doing and the research that you continue to do and working with, students and graduate students as well. What makes you hopeful about kind of going forward, and what do you hope to see in the future?
Oh gosh, such good questions. I think what really directs me is trying to align my practices with my values.
Right.
And the things that I truly want for students. I think so often, like, again, we look at IEPs and things like that, where often the goals are about adult convenience, and they're things we wouldn't expect of other children. Often, like, it's like, oh, say hello to everybody in the class. That's unreasonable. Respond appropriately to bullies. Well, why is this a goal for this child and not for the bullies? What is appropriate anyways? I think we need to start thinking about goals for students that really are about connecting them to themselves, that are about how they want to develop, but they're about voice and choice and moving in a direction where we're enhancing their ability to take ownership and ask for things that they need. And I say ownership, not independence, because I'm a bit critical of independence, because I think for those of us who are a bit more literal, we then, when we are not fully independent as adults, we feel like failures. And
I think we all have dependencies, right?
Interdependence.
We're not islands, right?
It is okay to need help. We need to normalize that. So I think just changing the culture where it's like, let's help students develop. Let's, if we want them to be democratic participants and, let's create those opportunities.
Yeah. Love it. Well, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody, but I want to thank you for joining me today. Again, want to encourage people, if you've not already read the book, and again, we did a book study for this, which is just ending, I think, next week, but we'll probably do another one in the future as well. So check out the book. I want to thank you, Kara, for being here, for who you are, for what you do. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey and your wisdom, and for all the things that we see out there that are challenging, it's always great to connect with people like you that are doing work that it's making a difference. It's making a difference for kids. It's making a difference for graduate students, and the potential impact of all of that downstream is really fantastic. So thank you for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And I'll ask you to stick around for one moment, but everyone else, goodbye. We'll be back again, I think, in 2 weeks. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thanks for joining us today. And again, come and join us again. And if you found this helpful or useful, share it. Share it. We make it available online. Share it with your friends. Share it with your colleagues. This is how we get change to happen when we share these things. So thanks for being here. And we will see you again next time.
Sounds great.
All righty.